Law because you never know, especially here in the Central Valley, like, perpetrators out there that are taking advantage of us as bartenders and staff. It makes us look bad like we're the ones doing it when we're not.
A new effort to prevent people from getting drugged at California bars. A look at this and other new laws that have gone into effect around the state.
It just seemed to me we can't afford that risk, and we should be seeking a stronger alternative.
Unease at our nation's capital after President Biden's recent debate performance last week. What some lawmakers are saying about whether or not Democrats should back a new candidate for the White House this fall.
I am suspending my campaign for the 20th Congressional District and endorsing Congressman Vince Fong in the November 5th election.
Bowing out of the race for Congress, we hear from Tulare County Sheriff Mike Budro on why he decided to not run against Congressman Vince Fong in the 20th District. All that and more right now on Sunday Morning Matters.
Connecting you to issues that matter across the valley, around the state, to the halls of Congress. Sunday Morning Matters starts now.
And good Sunday morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eric Rucker. We begin with a new push to keep people safe at bars and clubs across California. Last week, a new California law went into effect that aims to protect people from potential predators. Nearly 2,400 businesses with a liquor license are now required by law to have drug test kits for patrons. Our Jason Toktagian spoke to a local bar manager about how the new law will have a positive impact.
We're always out for the safety of our guests.
As of July 1st, California bars and nightclubs that sell liquor, wine, and beer are required to have drug test kits available.
It's testing for Rohypnol, which is roofie, GHB, and then ketamine. And then we have the kits available. They're available for 87 cents. And then all you do is take your drink to the bar. We will test it for you. And if the strip turns blue or dark, we'll take your drink away right away and we'll go from there.
Bars like Elliott's will also have to display signs that indicate they have drug testing kits.
So we have to have the signs posted at the entrance, in the restrooms, and also back here for the staff to see and for patrons to see. And it's basically saying don't get roofied. We have test kits available.
Elliott's bar manager believes this law will help keep more people safe and make going out on the town more appealing.
It's a good law because you never know, especially here in the Central Valley, like, perpetrators out there that are taking advantage of us as bartenders and staff. It makes us look bad like we're the ones doing it when we're not.
Not every establishment that sells alcohol will be impacted.
Restaurants would not apply to this. So even though they would, let's say, have a bar at their restaurant, they're a restaurant.
For Sunday Morning Matters, I'm Jason Toktagian.
A handful of other laws also went into effect last week that will impact millions of Californians. And one of the most controversial of those laws includes an increase in California's gas tax. A new law increases the tax by 2 cents, bringing the total to 60 cents per gallon. A new tax has also been levied on gun manufacturers and ammunition vendors in the state, with funds raised going to school safety and gun prevention programs. Also new this month, drivers will have more time to purchase new license plate stickers after their tags expire, going from 30 days to 60 days. In Sacramento last week, a bill by Valley Republican State Senator Shannon Grove to increase penalties against adults who purchase children for sex is advancing in the legislature, but not the way that Grove had hoped. If signed, the legislation would classify the purchasing of minors 15 years and younger for sex as a felony. But Grove says she is frustrated because when she first introduced the bill earlier this year, it targeted adults who sex trafficked all minors, including 16 and 17-year-olds. Fast forward to now, though, Democratic Public Safety Committee chairs added amendments to that bill that would require 16 and 17-year-olds to first prove in court that they are victims of sex trafficking, and only then could the sex purchaser be charged with a felony.
It shouldn't be that difficult to get a bill out of this building that protects children from those that want to purchase them and buy them for sex. This should be a no-brainer. If a grown man purchases children for sex, they should go to prison.
Democrats say the changes they added to the bill would still protect 16 and 17-year-olds and will make it easier to get the bill to the governor's desk. Also out of the state capitol last week, Governor Gavin Newsom and legislative Democrats announced that they are scrapping their plan to put a competing public safety measure on the upcoming November ballot. The governor says he simply ran out of time. Last month, a bipartisan coalition of district attorneys, retailers, and law enforcement groups announced they qualified a ballot measure to reform Prop 47. That's the 2014 law that changed some nonviolent crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, including retail theft valued at less than $950. After one group qualified a measure to reform 47, Newsom and Democratic legislative leaders said that they wanted to put their own competing public safety measure on the ballot after expressing concerns the other measures would lead to mass incarceration. But after all that, Newsom said while he had the votes needed in the legislature to qualify his measure, he was unable to meet the deadline to get it onto the ballot. Newsom says that he instead plans to advance a package of bills he believes will tackle retail theft and the opioid epidemic. Last week, he wrote this that reads in part, "I look forward to working with the legislature and our public safety and retail partners to go even further in the days ahead without returning to the damaging policies of decades past." Last week in Washington, the Biden campaign was scrambling to reassure key allies President Biden is fit for office after his debate performance kicked off a frenzy among Democrats. Washington correspondent Raquel Martin has more on the president's efforts to shore up support.
Multiple governors, including Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear have all traveled to D.C. to sit down with the president. Now, while all of them have come out publicly in support of President Biden since the debate, Pritzker, for one, says he would like to hear directly from the president. The White House is pushing back on concerns about the president's ability to run for a second term.
The president is clear-eyed, and he is staying in the race.
Nearly a week after his debate performance sparked a frenzy within the party.
There's a cold, there's a jet lag, things happen.
The president is on full damage control, meeting with key Democratic governors at the White House. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the president also held calls with top Democrats on the Hill.
For strong conversations, that's something that the president told me and my team directly moments ago.
For some, the damage is already done.
We have to have another choice.
Tuesday, Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett became the first sitting Democratic lawmaker to publicly call for the president to step aside. He warns he's not the only one with doubts after seeing the debate and is calling on others to speak out.
It just seemed to me we can't afford that risk, and we should be seeking a stronger alternative.
The Democratic National Committee chair is brushing off polling showing President Biden trailing Donald Trump. On Twitter, he asked party members to pump the brakes and stay focused to beat Trump in November. In Michigan, First Lady Jill Biden doubled down.
And he is going to beat Donald Trump just like he did in 2020.
For now in Washington, Raquel Martin, back to you.
California Governor Gavin Newsom was one of many Democratic governors who met with the president last week. The governor made the trip to stand with President Biden, according to a campaign spokesperson. Newsom was also in Atlanta after President Biden's debate, where he voiced support for the president after his performance that night. Joining us now to break down some of the important points from the story and others is Capitol correspondent and my good friend Aon Wallace, joining us now from Sacramento. Aon, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Eric, good. How are you? Good to be with you. Good to be with everybody in the Valley.
Appreciate that. So we want to begin with Governor Newsom's trip to Washington, D.C., while President Biden obviously continues to deal with the fallout of his debate against former President Trump. Are you hearing anything from Newsom's campaign regarding where the governor stands when it comes to whether or not President Biden should drop out of the race for the White House?
Absolutely, Eric. And in fact, Newsom sent out an email to all of his donors and everybody on his email list saying emphatically that Biden is staying in the race and that Newsom is all behind Biden. So Newsom is totally supporting Biden here. That was his main takeaway from his visit to the White House, to Washington, D.C. last week. So that is exactly where Newsom stands. Eric?
So that parlays into this. The governor is widely viewed as a potential candidate in the future for a presidential race. Could his actions now play a larger role in any future campaigning? Essentially, Aton, I'm asking you this. Is he laying the groundwork now for the nation to know his name?
Well, no doubt, Eric, and that is an excellent question because, listen, even 4 years from now, let's say he runs in just hypothetically, I mean, let's just remember for a second, Newsom now is campaigning in New Hampshire. He's going to some of the big swing states, Pennsylvania. So not only is he campaigning there for Biden, but he is absolutely putting his name there. And let's not forget, he's already going as a major Biden surrogate just at the debate. I mean, there was a picture showing him surrounded by literally dozens of cameras and members of the media. So what does that do for Newsom? Yes, it gets him as a surrogate promoting the campaign for President Joe Biden, the re-election campaign, but it also gets his name out there, his name across the country.
Aton, let's talk about the governor's actions when it comes to public safety last week. He ended an effort to compete with a ballot initiative to reform Prop 47 here in California. How will Newsom address his own concerns about more incarcerations in the state if this reform effort passes this November?
Well, Eric, really what Newsom is trying to do now that this competing ballot measure that he really did not want to go on the ballot, well, now, as it turns out, he's still pushing through more than a dozen bills that he says will address retail theft and drug use, fentanyl epidemic, etc., without going after what he says is this mass incarceration issue. He says it's simply going to go after organized retail thieves and repeat offenders. He says that will ensure that this does not impact mass incarceration while still also benefiting public safety. That is his argument. Republicans and others, in fact, a bipartisan coalition, though, in favor of that ballot measure that has qualified, well, they say that it should be both. It should be both the legislative bills that Newsom is pushing for and their ballot measure. They believe that will truly help with public safety and target retail thieves. Eric?
So you mentioned bills. Let's talk about the laws themselves, the bills that already became laws, and a slew of new laws kicked in last week, from the gas tax increase to new taxes on guns and ammunitions. Will these increases in taxes do anything for the state's massive budget deficit, or will it take more than this to address that particular problem?
Well, I'll tell you what the supporters, at least, of these taxes will say about that. For instance, Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, Democrat from the San Fernando Valley, he says that 11% excise tax on gun manufacturers, for instance, is going to raise $160 million in revenue for the state every year, specifically for school safety and gun violence prevention programs. He says without that tax revenue, simply would not have even been a thought to fund those programs with that amount of money. So he believes something like that will impact the state positively. And same, by the way, with supporters of the gas tax increase, now 60 cents a gallon, including former Governor Jerry Brown, current Governor Gavin Newsom. Both say it will help with the roads and infrastructure projects across the state. So they say it will impact California in that sense and give them revenue that otherwise they would have had to try to squeeze into the budget. And we already know it's a very difficult budget year with a multi-billion-dollar deficit. But Republicans, including Senator Rosalisa Ochoa Bogue from the Inland Empire, well, she says it is time for a gas tax pause. She wants the governor to pause the gas tax because she believes, and several Republicans believe, that gas tax increase is only going to hurt everyday Californians.
Aton, I want to jump to what happened recently in the building right behind you at the state capitol. There was a very chaotic scene just a few days ago. What can you tell us about what led to protesters shouting at lawmakers, and then the very odd twist of lawmakers in response singing back? What was going on there?
Indeed, yeah, this was an interesting scene, Eric. I had never seen anything like it before. This is really what happened. That Wednesday evening, they had a session in the Assembly chamber, and in the second-story gallery, where people are allowed to watch the lawmakers basically do their thing, do their business, vote on bills. In the second-story gallery, that's where protesters calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war and for the end of support for the state of Israel basically started yelling and chanting and shouting and even yelling profanities at lawmakers as they called for that ceasefire. Now, remember, the state capitol does not deal with, for the most part, international affairs. In fact, lawmakers had nothing on the agenda that night about anything in the Middle East or anything outside of the state of California. So lawmakers were absolutely surprised by this, and this was on the eve of July 4th. So what happened? Well, Democrats and Republicans, who normally bicker about everything and disagree on many, many, many subjects, they got together, started waving American flags and started to sing the Star-Spangled Banner. So it's certainly a very interesting thing. They were doing that to drown out the noise of the protesters. By the way, lawmakers basically continued with their business that night, voting on two major bills, but specifically two major bonds, I should say, that will appear on the upcoming ballot. Eric?
Well, we appreciate your time, Aton. I know our viewers love seeing you. If they want to see more, we also know that you'll be hosting Inside California Politics this morning. What are some of the top stories that we'll expect to hear from you in the next half hour?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to plug the show, Eric. Going to be a good show for our viewers today. Going to have an interview with Republican U.S. Senate candidate Steve Garvey. He's going to speak with reporter John Fenoglio from KTLA-5 in Los Angeles. Then I will also speak with Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Adam Schiff. So that's going to be a little bit about that. Of course, we have now just about 4 months or so until the election. So Schiff and Garvey are both increasing their campaigning across the state. Garvey's, speaking of, by the way, Israel, he just got back from his trip to Israel. He's going to talk about that. So that's just one of the major things we can expect on the show this week. Hope you can join us.
Our Capitol correspondent, Aon Wallace, my good friend. We've known each other for years. Very proud of the work that you've been doing inside and outside of the state capitol. Have yourself a great Sunday. We appreciate it, buddy.
Eric, thanks for having me.
And still ahead this morning, a candidate drops out of the South Valley congressional race months before the election. Analysis on what happens next in California's 20th district when we come back.
You're watching Sunday Morning Matters.
KC24 is your local election headquarters. Tulare County Sheriff Mike Budro has officially suspended his campaign for the state's 20th congressional district ahead of the November general election. Budro recently lost the special election against Republican Vince Fong for the 20th district to fill the vacated seat for the remainder of the year. In a video released on his social media accounts, Budro says that he is now endorsing Fong for the full-term position that will be voted on this November.
While we were on opposite sides of this campaign, at the end of the day, we're Republicans. We're family men and fighters who are committed to protecting individual liberty, reducing the cost of living, and maintaining safe communities for our neighbors. That's why I am suspending my campaign for the 20th Congressional District and endorsing Congressman Vince Fong in the November 5th election.
Joining me now to discuss what happens next in the race for California's 20th congressional district is KC24 reporter Katherine Phillips. Katherine, thanks so much for being with us this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here and talk about this.
All right, so you are somebody who knows a lot about this particular race. You have been following this district and its race for months during a special election all the way to now. So what happens, and this is the simplistic question and possibly answer from you, what happens now that Budro has bowed out?
I mean, really in simple terms, what happens now is the fact that the representative for California's 20th congressional district is going to be Vince Fong. He's already there. He already won. The last time voters went to the turn in their ballots, he went to D.C. He's there. So that means he's going to finish out the rest of Kevin McCarthy's term, and then come January, he'll start his full 2-year term. You know, this means that voters have ultimately already decided.
Budro has been up against it since the very beginning in this, including his opponent receiving some big-time endorsements, not only by former President Trump, but former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy himself. How much did just that, I guess, underdog mentality part that didn't really play into the decision for him to eventually drop out? And how much was he just up against it when it comes to Budro from the very beginning?
I mean, here's the thing. So yes, Trump's endorsement matters. Trump has real supporters. They're passionate. What he says, they matter to them. He listens to what they say. So we can't say that Trump's endorsement didn't play a role at all. But I think what really makes a difference here, what was the money? When it comes down to that logistically, Fong had a very well-funded campaign with local money, but also money from McCarthy's allies, from people in D.C. And that makes a difference to voters because they're seeing Fong's ads on TV more. He's able to do more work on the ground. Budro has said to me many times, especially after the last special election, election, that money was already becoming a factor to him when it came to that decision. I mean, he talked to me about wanting to be responsible to his supporters when it came to making the ultimate decision to suspend the campaign.
So we talked about Budro's issues that he had to be able to become the congressman, but at the same time, it wasn't always easy going for Fong himself. He had some legal issues when we were talking about this earlier on, and when I was in Sacramento, this was statewide news. Would he even be able to run for this seat when it comes down to the legal pressures? How do you think that Fong handled that?
I mean, his campaign has always said they wanted the voters to decide. That was important for them from day one, even before the courts decided. That's what they said. They said, let the voters decide, and ultimately, obviously, voters did decide on this. I think it really is interesting to follow. You know, from months ago, we weren't sure whether or not he was actually going to be able to run in this race. To now, he's already there. But I think they would tell you that this is a victory without a doubt. They would say that the voters decide, and they would say that that was the point here, is to let the voters decide. Don't get it caught up into the courts. But I mean, there was some time that we didn't think that he would be able to be there, but now he is the incumbent congressman.
All right, so one more question for you. When it comes to Budro, what does the future hold for him? Is he trying to stay in the political realm? Is he getting out of it? What have you heard from him?
I mean, he has made it very clear to me that this is not the end to it. In his suspension video for this race, he even mentioned that he is starting his own political action committee. It is called Golden State Justice. So you don't do something like that if you plan to just return back to being a local sheriff and staying in just the one county. This has indicated to him that this is really going to be another campaign. He will run for other opportunities. You don't do something like this if this is really going to be your last effort to make it into the political arena. So, you know, as for what's next, I mean, we should stay tuned, and I think that something else is coming.
And we know when we are going to be staying tuned that you'll be on top of the entire way. Katherine Phillips, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
All right, we appreciate it. Still ahead on Sunday Morning Matters, a historic ruling by the Supreme Court could mean changes to the presidency. How the High Court's ruling on presidential immunity could impact some of the trials for former President Donald Trump. That's when we come back.
You're watching Sunday Morning Matters.
Former President Donald Trump will likely not face trial ahead of this year's election for charges stemming from January 6. It comes after a historic Supreme Court ruling last week that gives presidents broad immunity from prosecution. Washington correspondent Maddie Beer-Temple breaks down the case.
The court's conservative majority ruled that presidents are immune from prosecution for official acts but not unofficial ones. The decision means that former President Donald Trump has immunity in some capacity from criminal charges, alleging he played a role in trying to overturn the 2020 election.
And it's a dangerous precedent.
President Biden criticized the court, saying Trump should go to trial for his actions on January 6th.
And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election.
Immunity, you got absolute immunity.
Trump allies praised the ruling.
We're winning everywhere, right? And we're going to win more.
On Truth Social, the former president said this was a win for the Constitution and democracy. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts said, quote, if a former president's official acts are routinely subjected to scrutiny in criminal prosecutions, the independence of the executive branch may be significantly undermined. The court's liberal wing disagreed with Justice Sonia Sotomayor, writing, the ruling makes, quote, a mockery of the principle that no man is above the law. Justices didn't define official versus unofficial acts. They're leaving that to lower courts to decide. In Washington, I'm Maddie Beer-Temple.
And that's going to do it for us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right back here next week.